Welcome back. And Fifi, I
Yes.
hope we're energized. We're waiting. So we've done the institutional resilience conversation. I think you are going into the workers now, the individuals. Tell us what's coming.
Yep. That's exactly right. Wale, welcome back, everyone. I do hope that you guys had enough time to stretch your legs and get your last bit of energizer to take you through the last stretch of today's program, be it your coffee or your energy drink. To those of you who are joining us right now, maybe for the first time today, welcome. We have just had a wonderful session hosted by my colleague, Wale Famurera, on the importance of strengthening the resilience of TVET systems. Really important institutions to facilitate the learning and the reskilling and upskilling of individuals in the skills revolution, particularly as, capacity. A lot of institutions, universities right now don't have the full space to accommodate everyone and teaching everyone, and also cost. A lot of the cost barriers that do come to traditional university education somehow made up for at TVETs, which are a lot more easier to access in terms of cost. Although there was a lot of mention made on the importance of improving the perception of TVETs just to enable their qualifications to carry a little bit more weight, not only for the individual, but also for the employer who would be taking on these individuals who are reskilling and upskilling themselves. So now we're going to take the conversation onto the pathway. The pathway to reskilling. It actually ties very nicely to the conversation that we have had previously. And so if you were in on that discussion and you didn't have an opportunity to ask questions, or maybe the question that you asked was not taken because of time, do feel free to send them through now, because the conversation that we're having is quite interlinked, but definitely putting the focus on the employer and hearing from the employer what they are seeing out there by way of the skills revolution. So according to the International Labour Organization, right now we have around 220 million people who are jobless all around the world. And the more worrying thing is that of these people who are jobless, around 69, or we'll round it off and say 70% of employers right now are saying that they don't have the skills. They don't have the skills. These individuals who can work, who are able to work, who want to work, unfortunately don't have the skills for the employer to give them a job and absorb them. And I think that as we move on into this digital and this green revolution, there is a high probability and a high chance that this gap could grow even bigger if the right interventions are not made right now. So let's hear a bit more about these right interventions to address the skills mismatch, particularly in the upskilling and the reskilling of the workforce. That's what the session will be focusing on. Let us know what you think. Comments, you guys know what to do right now. For those of you who are joining, it's in the comment section where you can pose your questions. Feel free also to reach out to us on social media using the hashtag KDF Forum 2022, and you can follow the KDF facility either on Twitter or on LinkedIn to share your thoughts. With that said, let's get straight to the discussion, and let me introduce you to the speakers who will be taking the day one of today's program home for us, beginning with Livia Alfonsi, the PhD candidate at the University of California's Berkeley Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics. Good afternoon to you, Livia.
Good afternoon, Fifi. Thanks for having me.
Yes, nice background, by the way. We also have Manuela Prina, the Head of Skills Identification and Development Unit at the European Training Foundation. Wow, it's the battle of the backgrounds, because yours is also quite bold. Hi, Manuela.
Hi, Fifi. Actually, is a real one. I'm actually today hosted at the Frankfurt office of the Asian Development Bank. So I want to thank them for giving me a room where I can connect with you.
No, that's fantastic. And maybe if we have time, you can share some of the conversations that you've been having over there, probably linked into what we are about to have right now. But let me introduce you to the other speakers also who are joining us. We've got Mona Mourshed, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Generation. Afternoon, Mona.
Hello.
No, honestly, I honestly believe there was a secret memo that was sent to bring the best background.
We're trying, all of us.
You're doing the most. Certainly injecting a whole lot of needed energy at this time of the day. Let me continue with the introductions. We've got Reza Yacobi, who's the founder of XertCoin, also with us.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Reza. The memo missed you. The memo missed you in terms of... But thanks for providing the balance, the neutrality.
I know.
Yes. Elfi, just continuing with the conversations. Elfi Klumpp, the head of partnership development at the global education at Festo Didactic.
Hi.
I got it right. Hi, ma'am. How are you doing?
Hello. Good to see you and great to be back at LKDF.
Yes, wonderful. And again, to you, great background. Caroline Jenner, also the Chief Operating Officer at GA Worldwide with us. Very nice. Very nice. And Reza, I hope I'm not putting you under pressure here or making you feel uncomfortable.
Not at all.
I love it. I love it. Great sport.
I'm half in suit, half in pajamas because midnight.
If we must be honest, I'm half in blouse, half in gym wear because I need to go and run after the session because I haven't been exercising. But that's an overshare. Last but not least, we've got Martin Bjorkman, the marketing director for Africa at Hi.
Hi. Well, now what is the judgment of this background? It's all electric.
I love it.
Wow.
I love it. Afternoon to you all. And thanks so much for taking the time this afternoon to join in on a very important discussion on the skills revolution. So we're looking at ensuring that ultimately no one gets left behind in the future economy, which will demand quite a different set of skills, quite a different kind of individual to show up and to participate meaningfully in this economy. The previous session was speaking quite a lot about the young people, and I think that is a really important point. I mean, I'm from a continent in which the average age of the population here is around 25, and young people make the bulk of the population here on the continent. So I think that while the picture in the rest of the world might be slightly different, their picture also is important to speak about, given that we are in a situation and in a world right now where we're living longer. And although you have a situation whereby in many parts of the developed world, you have an elderly population, but you've got an elderly population that's living longer, that will also need to be in the workplace, also need to be absorbed at work. And so as we kick off this discussion, Manuela, I hope you can lead us here in terms of the departing point in improving the level of resilience for young individuals, for elderly workers or mid-age workers, and especially as it does come to their skills acquisition.
Thanks, Fifi. I mean, this is really a very important question, and we will need to have a good resilience to go through this session together this afternoon. Let me share with you straight away that, there is no really recipe. So it's not that we have a solution that can be simply, implemented and we have the result that we want. But surely we know what are the ingredients that we need to mix together. And probably the recipe is quite different in situations that also have different factors. First of all, I want to clarify, we did this also when we had our teaser for the event, the word resilience, because while we know also from the results that we have from the survey that we did in preparation to the forum, that most of our participants look at resilience as an ability to adapt. In fact, when we talk to people, especially to young people, there is actually an understanding that by resilience we mean, let it go, let it pass, just absorb. So it's important instead that we say that resilience is really the ability to respond, so to be the cause of our future. And this is what we need to inject in our societies, in our economies, in the world of work, and in the world of education. Now, how do we do that? First of all, we need to ensure that some basic ingredients are there. The first that I want to mention is access to learning. We might think this is granted, but it's not. We actually released yesterday first results of a survey that we did online on both EU member states and also 10 countries outside the EU. And 78% of respondents from countries that are in the EU neighborhood tell us that they have problems with access to learning opportunities. Now, if this ingredient is missing, forget about supporting and fostering resilience. The second point is the quality of learning. So it's important again that we listen to the voice of the youth telling us education and training is not helping us to get ready not only for the future, but for the present. So there is still a gap that we need to work on as a priority. And the third point is definitely the type of skills and competences that we support in the learning process for both youth and adults. And I mentioned two of those competences that are key for the future. One are related to digital skills and competences, which I would say that today is like saying you need to be literate. Okay, so is writing and reading. Today we need to add the third point, which is being able to approach the digital world. Because if you cannot, your ability to perform not only as a worker or as a student, but as a citizen has issues. And this kills the resilience that we can have in the society. And the second are the green skills, the ability to really support our common goal to make our world greener and sustainable. And so those are the three ingredients that I think we need to focus on if we really want our society to be able to respond and to take action for the future.
Okay. No, thanks for that opening remark. And maybe, as you say, I mean, there's no recipe right now. We're trying to make it. So let's stick with the analogy of the recipe. I think I like it. And I like the ingredients that you have listed so far, being the access to learning opportunities, the quality of the learning in itself, and the type of the skills and the competence we support. So if we do stick to the analogy of ingredients that are required to build this really resilient skills revolution and the skills or resilient workforce pie, we'll call it the resilient workforce pie. Then Caroline, I'd like to come to you. You can tell I like food. I'm eating too much lately, but it's fine. I'm going to come to you and just ask for your ingredients as we stick on the opening topic of looking at how we can improve the resilience of these young individuals and young workers in the terms of skills. So maybe you can give us a sense of the kind of ingredients that you are putting in the pie at JA Worldwide in the work that you do to try and equip the young people that you work with these skills to make them a lot more employable in the workforce, the workplace, not only today, but also the future workplace tomorrow.
Thanks, Fifi. Well, this is a really great conversation because I really appreciated what Manuela was talking about in terms of access, because I think one of the key, maybe I can add to the ingredients, which is what are the success factors? What are the things you need to do in order to bring those ingredients carefully together and make them actually work? Well, there's a chemistry that you need to create there. And I think one of the things that we've learned is you have to work really effectively with all the stakeholders, both the education system as well as the others, the private sector, other institutions in the community. The whole family has to get involved. It takes the whole village to raise a child, as they say. And we've reached last year we reached 12.5 million young people, but that was in formal settings, it was in informal settings, it is with all kinds of different players engaged in the conversation and in the teaching and the learning. And we work, for example, we do work very closely with organizations like ETF, driving entrepreneurship education, which is our specialty, entrepreneurship education in Europe, how to drive the policies, how to talk to the people on the ground. And we do think that this is the kind of thing, resilience is not the kind of thing you can just deliver online. It's something that you have to be present on the ground, regardless, for example, of political instability, regardless of all of the challenges. We think the footprint is important, the presence is important. We're in 115 countries working with, for example, GIZ in Ukraine to reach 300,000 youth with their help, or young Ukrainian refugees, or our work in Yemen. So I think this focus on bringing the real world situations to young people, that's where we concentrate. We say, we need to bring us, we are the NGO that can slip up through the middle in between all of these people and bring in work readiness skills, entrepreneurship, financial health, education, helping teachers bring this kind of content and methodology into their classrooms, but also helping people who have work experience from the private sector, helping them work effectively with educators. So one of the things we're concerned about is reaching underserved youth in all of these places where they may not otherwise have access to this education. Well, we can help make that possible because we go to where they are. They don't have to come and try to find that elsewhere. And the theory of change is that learning by doing through a safe environment where young people can try and fail, continuous improvement, mentoring, feedback, working in small teams, that's how they cultivate the resilience that they need. And that experience rubs off on others, their friends, their family, their siblings. And then our alumni, I'm talking about older young people, perhaps I can put it like that. Once they're sort of 19, 20, 21, I mean, we work with young people when they're quite young, and then our alumni move into, they learn a lot of self-efficacy and work, they're more quick to get into leadership roles, they start businesses, their resilience, their motivation to do that is quite high. And that means that they're in a position to perpetuate that resilience in their communities. So I think it's really about building that multiplier effect through all these partnerships that will take us forward on this agenda.
And Caroline, just out of interest, I mean, that you have been able to reach such a significant amount of young people in the past year, both from the informal and formal sector, I think you quoted some 12.5 million or so, is really a big deal. But on your point of, being the agent that brings all the ingredients together, and the point that you've made about the importance of all stakeholders being on board here and working together, a whole family approach. I feel like we are, in an Italian kitchen right now making this meal, because Italians don't believe you can't have too many cooks at the pot, as it were. But in your approach of bringing everyone together, what have been some of the stumbling blocks preventing greater coordination, in your view? If you could just share that insight with us.
Well, I think, the education world and the business world often they're talking about the same things, but they don't speak the same language. So I think one of the barriers we often run into is we're talking about resilience in one place, which perhaps the business community might understand very well, but the same word may not translate in the same way to a teacher or to an educator. You may need to talk about different things. But you really have to be able to be an interlocutor, I think, between those communities, because the formal sector and informal sectors, it's almost like they create Chinese walls between them. And the same thing between business and education. They don't mean to, but it's so structured and institutionalized that I think that's one of the reasons it can be slow. I'm not saying it won't eventually happen, but it just gets slowed down by translation, the challenges of translation.
Okay. I suppose emphasizing the importance of organizations like yours to, you know, be the middle person and speaking to both parties.
Yes.
But let's move on. Livia, just in terms of what you've seen as from the educational background, just given the fact that, you know, the pandemic shock was a big shock. Even this digital shock that's underway is still pretty big, and the green shock with climate was pretty big. In terms of education and training, though, what have you seen in the space? What was the impact on skills and training prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, and now as you see it? I don't know if we can say post the pandemic. In fact, I was on a flight with a lady who works at the WHO on Sunday. She was coming to Johannesburg for training. She was coming from Cape Town. We were on a flight together. And I said, "Oh, you guys are doing training. That's wonderful. So are you guys saying that this pandemic is over?" She said, No, I mean, we're still looking at the possibility of other variants. So I'm not going to say post-pandemic because we don't know that we're there yet right now, but just the position where we are right now. So before the pandemic began, during and right now, what have you seen in your space as it does pertain to skills and education?
Yes, no, thanks Fifi for the question, and it's pretty on point. And now for, I'd say, almost a decade, we've been involved with a pretty large field experiment in Uganda specifically that aims at answering exactly your question. So what can skills training do? Like, how helpful can it be in helping youth transitioning to the labor market, both at times of, you know, economic let's say normalcy, and also at times of economic despair, rather, which is what we've been witnessing now with the COVID shock. So you should be able to see on the screen a simplified infographic of the research design and the main findings, but I'm just going to try to be very brief. But we basically designed this very big experiment that was rolled out before COVID, and then we were able to follow our respondents also during COVID and to study the role of skills training in building resilience to the crisis. Exactly. And we started in 2012, so 10 years ago. Wow. In partnership with BRAC Uganda, what we did was we advertised a vocational training scholarship across the country, across Uganda, for economically disadvantaged youth. So earlier we were talking about kind of reaching everybody. So that's what we were trying to do. Now, we had way more eligible candidates than scholarships available. And so what we did was we were able to randomize basically applicants into 3 different groups. The first group got this vocational training. So we subsidized a 6-month sector-specific training. Now, in a partner vocational institute, we were talking about TVET in the previous sections. The second group instead got a firm training, so we'll call it FT, but a training kind of in an on-the-job training, if you want, like in the form of apprenticeship. And then a third group was a control group. And now the program was rolled out in 2013. We then followed up our workers. So the total was 1,700 workers. So quite a large size for an experiment that lasted for so long. We then followed them up for 3 years. And what we do see is that you can get more details in the paper for the main results, but the bulk of it is that if we average out the 3 years results on labor market outcomes, we see that both workers that obtain the vocational training type of upskilling and those that obtain the firm training ones resulted in positive and significant impact on labor market outcomes. Specifically, the 20 and 14% I'm reporting here are the higher chances that they got being employed basically over the control group. We also report substantial gains in terms of skills. So these programs are both equally or more or less equally good, if you want, producing skills. However, when we go look at the dynamics, if you want, throughout the 3 years, what we see is that the labor market gains were pretty short-lived for the workers that obtained this kind of firm-specific type of training, and were instead more long-lived or long-lasting, if you want, for the vocational training. Now, as I said, we follow the same people when COVID kind of, well, before and during and after, let's say after COVID. And what we were able to see is that up to 7 years later, so we only followed, actually, sorry, I should be precise, we only followed the workers in the vocational training arm and those in the control. And basically what we were able to see is that up to 7 years later, so in 2020, before COVID, so in January 2020, students that were skilled through this vocational trainings were still doing substantially better. Here I'm reporting a couple of the main findings, but they were 14% more likely to be working in a skilled job. They were earning substantially more, 15% more. And then COVID arrived. Now, overall, our sample was of young and disadvantaged worker has been quite highly affected, I'd say, both in the vocational training treatment arm, in the control group. However, interestingly, and I would say unexpectedly for us, we find that the vocational trainees were in fact hit hardest during the lockdowns. Now, Uganda had two quite strong lockdowns, businesses shut down, severe mobility restrictions, and so on. We all remember those days. So the students that were, the workers that were previously students in vocational training were hit hardest. However, what happened was that they also recovered much faster. And so what we do see, and then I'm going to conclude, is that up to basically 9 years later, and notwithstanding COVID, the vocational training workers continue to have higher, the vocational training continue to have higher impacts on the labor market outcomes also throughout the pandemic, even though, as I said, during the lockdowns, partly because of the jobs they were kind of doing, they had been hit the hardest. They were also able to kind of jump back faster than the control. And so kind of to conclude, I think what we have been learning from the study, and I'm happy to go back to it later also as to why we think that some of these things are happening, the skills that these workers obtained together with the certification that they obtained from the vocational training were really helpful in allowing them to kind of basically rise through the job ladder and build a career. Also, as I said, notwithstanding the COVID shock that kind of happened and somewhat in between for them.
Okay, so the COVID shock showed that they got hit the hardest, but they also bounced back. Jump forward
better
pretty
than
well
before.
as well. Yeah. But who I'm interested, can you give us more color on the students in the did you say the controlled?
The control group.
So yeah, who are these students, and what kind of training did they undergo?
So this would be the workers in the control group did not get any particular skills training. So they would just go kind of, if you want, about their career as they would have without some external subsidy into like getting these types of training. So these are, at the beginning, these were young people. To be eligible for the program, you had to be below 25 and from a disadvantaged background and out of school. So what we're doing is we're basically comparing workers to whom we subsidized either vocational training or this firm training to a pure control group that you can think of it as, they went ahead with life as they would have otherwise, in a way. So they didn't get any they could have gotten some trainings if they wanted to privately. We do see that most of them don't get any sort of training, but they just do their own, like independent career, if you want.
Okay, and so you're saying, or your research, just looking at the sample in Uganda, you're saying that when it came to the workers who were given company-specific training, that was specific skills that they got. So the reason, can I assume that the reason why the workers who received vocational training came out a little bit stronger, even during and after after a pandemic is because their skill set as a result of vocational training was a lot more diversified?
So we're gonna, I would say there could be a little bit of that, but I think the main reason we observe what we do observe is because of the certification that the vocational training gives you. So on top of providing you with skills, the vocational training also provides you with a way to, on the labor market, signal those skills in a credible way. And so I think that is what helped the students, the workers, the students to more easily jump back into new jobs and signal to the labor markets, look, I have all the skills that I've learned in the institute. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to extrapolate from that to say that your ingredient in building this resilient pie, skills pie, is vocational training.
Yes.
Okay. Mona, just coming to you, ma'am. Your take, the impacts of skills training prior, during, right now, at this juncture that we are in the pandemic, some of the work that's happening there at Generation and some of the insights you can share with us.
Sure. So let me try to stick with your pie analogy and share our recipe and the ingredients. So first, just as context, Generation supports adult learners to achieve economic mobility through a career. So we support adult learners of all ages. And when they come to us, 90% are unemployed. And of that, half of them are long-term unemployed, which means 6.5 months plus. We then train and place them into careers, after which 80% are employed within 3 months of program completion. And that becomes 90% within 6 months of program completion. And we work across now 35 plus professions, from healthcare, tech, customer service, skilled trades, and green jobs. And then we track what happens in terms of their well-being at 3 months, at 6 months, at a year, and then up to 6 years post-program. And so we can say 6 years after that, 70% continue to meet their daily financial needs, 40 to 60% are saving for the future. By the way, they tend to be saving for better housing, and so on. So let me now come to the pandemic. So essentially, during the pandemic, the customer service and the skilled trade jobs vanished, right? So they became, green jobs were there in some countries, particularly in Europe. We found pockets of green jobs. Tech grew dramatically for all the obvious reasons. And so tech suddenly became 40% of our portfolio. And then the question wasn't just about the jobs, but it also became how we deliver. And let me just share what our 7-step recipe is, if you will. So first, we pre-confirm job vacancies with our employer partners, and we now have 9,000 employers across the world, across our 16 countries. We then recruit our learners. They then experience a 6 to 14 week boot camp that is profession specific and that combines the technical skills, behavioral skills, and mindsets needed to perform at a high level in their profession. In parallel, we offer social support services. Then we facilitate interviews, and they have to be demonstration-based interviews between our graduates and our employer partners. And then once they're on the job, we continue the mentorship for 3 to 6 months. And we start tracking what we call the return on investment data. So both for our employers and for our graduates. And as I said, that goes up to 6 years post-program completion. And all of that creates a tremendous amount of data, as you can imagine, which we then use to figure out how to improve our intervention. So that's the recipe. Okay, so now what happened during COVID is that we could no longer have in-person classes for the obvious reasons. So we had to shift our delivery to being fully online or blended. And this is from a standing start where nearly all of our programming was in person. And so initially it was just about delivering over Zoom what we had delivered in person. But now then we began creating programs that are designed to be delivered fully online, in which case it's 40% synchronous, meaning we are in the same time and space, and 60% asynchronous, or it's blended, meaning 40% in person and 60% online. 18 months later, I can now say to you that the outcomes are nearly identical of our in-person programming and the blended or fully online. And I have to say that, and when I say outcomes, I mean the graduation rates, the job placement rates, the income increases, so our graduates increase their income by 3 to 4 times following generation. The job retention at 6 months, at 1 year, it's nearly all identical. And that came as a delightful surprise, in all honesty, because if you had asked us when we started our work in 2015 whether that would be possible, we would have said no. Right. So, and to be clear, it's not just about how you do the training part. I mean, we often, I think often in the world, we confuse training with employment. They are not synonyms. They are very different things, and there is a lot more. It requires all 7 of our steps to get to employment for our learners. The training alone is insufficient. And so we had to shift each of those 7 steps and all of the tools and the processes underpinning them to be delivered online. And it was not just a question of how do you make sure that they've got our learners have devices and Wi-Fi. It's also how do you manage space? I mean, often in many of the households of our learners, it's 5, 6 people sharing one phone. And how do you make sure that there is sufficient time and space for our learner to be able to really focus on their learning when another family member needs that phone to go somewhere else and do something else, or if it's a laptop, whatever it might be. So this is, I'm not by any means saying that we have this cracked, but we have come a long way in terms of being able to now deliver programming in a manner that enables us to reach more of our graduates. So for example, last year, so in total, we have 70,000 graduates. Last year was 12,000. This year, we are well on track to reaching 22,000. And so being able to shift to a new delivery model has also enabled us to have greater breadth, while at the same time having the same depth and durability of outcomes. So that's an exciting journey.
Yeah, really exciting. And it's great to see that the outcomes on an online versus the in-person way of training are similar. But I'd like to find out, you mentioned the fact that during the pandemic, there was the vanishing of customer service related jobs, and there was the vanishing of green jobs, or perhaps the reduction, and you saw this entire tech boom that enabled us to do what we're doing right now, conference hybridly, and all the tech that we've seen unfold across various industries. And so the jobs that have been demanded in the tech space have increased. And my question to you is that the students that you're training now, who are showing similar outcomes in terms of that learning and perhaps even the absorption rates into the labor market, are these mainly tech students only, and have the customer service jobs and the green jobs that did take a knock as a result of the pandemic, have those come back? And are you training students in these areas as well? And are you seeing a similar level of outcome with these jobs as well that are a little bit softer, and perhaps, for instance, with customer service, there are certain nuances that maybe you might not be able to pick up if we're talking online, that you can only deliver if it's in person, something similar to what Caroline was saying in her experience?
So let me take on each of those 3 questions. So first, who are the learners? Very few of them actually have previous tech background. So our learners, as I mentioned, 90% are unemployed when they come to us. The vast majority have a secondary school or, and or a vocational background. very few of our graduates have a university degree. It's only in countries, for example, like Spain and Italy, where just the nature of unemployment, youth unemployment in particular, is so high that, of course, university students are caught up in that. So the profile of our learners has not shifted, but you have to be excited about wanting to learn about tech, right? Because by definition, for any job, I would say, you have to be excited about the intrinsics of that career in order to really thrive at it. To your second question, are the other jobs coming back, or the other professional families? Absolutely, yes. I mean, so during the pandemic, I mean, there was very high demand of healthcare jobs, but there was also quite a lot of fear from learners and their families about going into healthcare jobs because of the pandemic environment. But essentially, we now, so it's back now. So green jobs, healthcare jobs, skilled trades, etc. But nonetheless, tech continues to be about 40% of the share, simply because that's where we see greatest job growth. I mean, our model is heavily, heavily dependent on where is employer demand, because that's what we are preparing our learners to enter. So the tech demand has not dwindled in the past period. And then lastly, to your question about, are we able to teach and successfully have outcomes for non-tech jobs? So clearly, for healthcare jobs that are patient-facing, at some point you need to demonstrate patient-facing skills. But we can offer, so those are programs that we offer in a blended format. And so it's 40% in person and 60% online, and we see similar outcomes as to what we had in person. For customer service, you can actually do quite a lot online. So just one very brief example. I mean, whereas before we would have done an in-person role play and people give, and our learners give feedback to each other, now they might see a stimuli online, which is, here's the scenario, and then they have to record their response to that scenario. But before they post, they're able to see the responses of their fellow class peers, and they give feedback, and they see the exemplar. And we find that our learners record and re-record 5 or 6 times before they feel comfortable posting. That's really valuable practice. That builds self-awareness. So we're finding ways to have that same magic that you would have in person also happening online.
All right. So your contribution would be embracing new learning or training platforms, embracing online in terms of your ingredient.
Along with the 7 steps. Along the 7 steps.
Yeah. Along with the 7 steps. I got you. Martin, as an employer of cars, I mean, just for instance, in South Africa, I think it was in April 2020, just a month after the hardest lockdown we've ever had, where vehicle sales went to like 0. No one was buying cars because you weren't allowed to be on the road if you weren't an essential service permit holder, and most of us weren't. So what was the need and use of buying cars when you were not allowed out your house? And I do recall that the vehicle industry as a whole did take a big knock. Although there's been a significant bounce back in the South African context, I can say, despite the fact that cars are a lot more expensive right now, and there is this cost of living crisis because of the ripple effects of the Ukraine war, the local industry is doing pretty okay. Maybe don't take my word for it. Martin, just your take then, and just if you can share your experience of the impacts of the pandemic on Volvo.
So thank you. The business is going great, thanks. There was a moment when we thought the business would completely die and the company disappear, but it turned out that was not the right assumption. Instead, we have made very good years because people start to buy things. They don't buy services, but they buy things they need, which need transport, right? So it quickly came back. So from that perspective, not a big deal. Really, more than the rocky road there. So, but I think if you zoom out a little bit, what is really happening? If you take a macro perspective on what is different today than from yesterday, we tend to think that everything moves fantastically quick. Some things do move quick, some don't. But if you look on the tracks behind me, Those trucks that you see there, they are all electric to start with. They have batteries instead of combustion engines. They have the power electronics going with that. They have a number of computers on board, more than on my toes and on my fingers. They were not there 25 years ago. Okay, so two things has changed. The amount of knowledge needed, both in our industry and I think in the world as a whole, the amount of knowledge is just going exponentially up. That is different. That has changed. And so that's it, the main prerequisites. The other one is it's difficult to travel for sustainability reasons. Opinion, perception is changing, and expectation of a next generation and so on. You have ongoing conflicts, and there is on and off pandemics. They are here to stay, right? So we have a different, let's say, environment to navigate in, and the question is, what do we do with that then? And I think a lot of good things were said there, and some good experience as well that you shared, Mona. I think was very interesting to listen to. And our answer to the question is, well, some of the job we've been doing before, we need to keep doing. So meaning we are training mechanics on a large scale base. We support many vocational schools, and we have excellent result of that. For example, we have one in Ethiopia. These people find a job immediately. They travel all over Africa, live in other countries, because they have the skills that are needed. That we shall keep doing. And coming back to doing the basics, we have since 1957 been running Volvo International Service Training Award. This year, 16,000 people participated in this training. This is scale. That makes a difference. It's not 20 people somewhere. It's 16,000 people who learn to work as a team, who learn to trust each other, to share information and find out that it's good to share. Trust is a foundation for development in many aspects and need to be trained and learned. And they also need the, like I said, practical technical skills. So if you look on the historical, or what we've been doing for a long time, working on the vocational schools, working on our own cascading activities of competence through competition, through the trainer sessions on. This, I agree, I think was more or less said before. We still need to do some level need to be reached before you can do something else. So there need to be a platform. Then I think we come to the really, let's say, different stuff or interesting stuff. If you look into managing a company, if you work on a board and you take strategic direction for a company, there is a concept of saying jumping the curve. When do you need to do something different? When can you not just keep doing the thing you've been doing a little bit better, but you need to do something else? That's jumping the curve as a concept. And that's where I think we are in terms of competence development and also answering the question, or one of the ingredients, because it was said, I think you said, Manuela, that there is not one answer to this, there is not one recipe. But one of the ingredients in the future recipe is to use new technology to train on demand. When, for example, the truck again behind me has a complicated breakdown and cannot easily be fixed by basic knowledge, well, then you put on your glasses and you get augmented reality environment, or you work on your phone and somebody else will guide you. Okay, this is taking on new technology. So we are again coming back. There needs to be a platform. There is no replacement for that. Some of it you can do online of that as well. But really, for the next step, jumping the curve means to take on new technology and get competence and support on demand. Then that's a moment when you have the best opportunity to teach someone something, or if you turn it the other way around, the best moment for the learner to absorb. That's when you have the real need. When you are in front of the truck and you need to solve the problem, that's when you best take this on board. And what is then important to make that function? And we have done some tests on that, which gave very interesting learning. So the technology as such is there, has been there for some time. It's more, how do you make it available? How do you support it around the clock? What languages and so on. And we learned that language is still a barrier. It doesn't matter if we could actually, in reality, guide the mechanics without saying anything. We can guide with our fingers, showing, do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. But there is this barrier still due to, let's say, not feeling comfortable to connect if you don't know the language. So our takeaway is quite basic. You need infrastructure, internet connection, basically, that is good enough. That was not the big issue, but you need to have it, and language. So those are the enablers to go on that train. They are very simple. They're so simple they may sound stupid, but those were the one we failed in our first initiative, or actually the language. So,
what language are we talking about here? We're talking German, Spanish, Italian, coding. Which language?
we do everything in English or French, or if you're in Latin America, you in Portuguese. We provide let's like 7 to 10 languages, but we don't provide every language, right? So we had, for example, a couple of guys in Turkey which were given equipment, which was introduced to this program. They did not connect, and we interviewed them. We tried to understand, and really it was about the comfort of being on a good enough language level to feel that I'll press the button and I connect to get hold of this, because the resource they had access to was just fantastic. The competence behind that, the people sitting behind and responding them could add a lot of value to them, but still there was this little barrier. So it's again, to be able to jump the curve, you need the basics. That's a message. And I think conceptually, remember to provide that concept that there is a lot of knowledge that cannot be cascaded in traditional way. You need to find other way, jump the curve, do something else.
Got you.
To take care of the trucks behind me and good business.
No, I got you. And those look like really mean trucks there behind you. So your ingredient is jumping the curve, just making use of technology to train on demand. And I think a really refreshing activity or move when it does come to the curve. A lot of us have been hearing a whole lot about the curve when it does come to the central bank speak and which central bankers were behind the curve and in front of the curve. So yours is quite a refreshing take of jumping the curve, using new technology. So we've got you there, Martin. Thanks so much. And just a reminder to the attendees, any questions that you have, any comments, any contributions. I mean, asking questions is what I do for a living, and I do know that I tend to hog the mic. I apologize. I'm willing to share it with you guys right now if you guys have anything to contribute as we do continue and get this discussion underway. We were supposed to get into the discussion on the responsibility and whose responsibility it was to drive this upskilling and reskilling. And I think that this is something that has been shared in the previous panels that we have had so far. It needs to be a holistic approach. Everyone is on board. So I'd like to just jump that topic of discussion just for a quick second and just get into in more depth the topic of micro credentials. It's something that was mentioned in the very first panel of the day where we set the scene. I think it was Kirsten from the GIZ who spoke about micro credentials and how they were complementary, these short courses in improving the employability of the workers as we do traverse into the skills revolution. So perhaps let's get deeper into micro credentials. Reza, let's hear from you, sir. Just in terms of the benefits of micro credentials as you see it for learners and for employers, if you can just give us a bit of a color of the work that you do and how micro credentials fits into what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Vivi. I hope you like my new background.
You know what? You've demonstrated adaptability. You have adapted.
Yes, exactly.
This was the trend was a beautiful background, and you got on board. I love it.
All right. Look, what we do as XertCoin is we've developed technologies using Web3, including blockchain, that basically makes credentials accessible and available to everybody in the world. And I want to draw on Livia's mention on her research before that they see that 15% increase in the income compared to that control group, mainly being because of having a certificate to offer, right? So a lot of people out there do have skills, and if they don't, they can learn skills with the new mega trends that are out there. So the internet is becoming more and more available. We're not there. There's still a lot to do, but it's becoming more and more available. The content to learn the skills, the examples that Mona and Caroline gave you, and also Martin with the works they do, that is becoming more and more available. And what the piece of puzzle that we are trying to contribute to is making credentials in terms of certificates available and accessible to everybody. Fortunately, the new technologies make it possible, something that was not possible really with the old ways of doing things, has become possible, and we are focused on that. Now, in terms of benefits of these micro-credentials, which are smaller packages of learning to basically do, and at the end you usually have a certificate. I think the major benefit of micro-credentials is you learn on demand. There's a need out there, you need to learn something, and then you learn it. As opposed to the traditional learning where you have this package deal and you have to learn a bunch of things, whether you're going to use it in the future or not, that's part of the package. And if we take that, this ingredients analogy, if we want to make this meal, you go shopping, grocery shopping in the supermarket, you know that you have some things at home, some of the ingredients you need. And that's like the skills you already know and have. And there are new things you want to learn. You can pick and choose in the supermarket and add that to your basket. You may not need all of the things that the supermarket has to offer, but you can pick and choose. And that's a way more efficient way of learning. The reason being, imagine you don't need 50% of a program, of a degree program you go through in your traditional way of learning. What happens there, you are spending a large amount of money and years of your life learning something. Now, if you say save half of that, you are basically doubling your resources to counter the fast pace of change out there by learning new skills, because you have more resources to allocate the skills that are now necessary to you. All right. And that, I think, helps you from, I'm borrowing these words from the previous sessions, helps you bounce forward, helps you rebuild, helps you reinvent, because you have more resources to allocate to these things now. All right. And basically, that helps everybody to become more resilient at the end, connecting it to the topic of the discussion. But to have to realize, to be able to realize the benefits of these micro credentials, you obviously need to have access to them first. So if the access is not there, you basically cannot realize any of these benefits. And that is what we're focused on. Now, what do we mean by access? It has a few dimensions. The first dimension is where you live affects your access. Some countries around the world, there is less than 5% access to tertiary education of any form for people in those countries. there's not enough infrastructure, not enough facilities for them to go to and learn and earn credentials. In other countries, more people have access, and that gap is growing. It is expected, according to the World Bank's data, that there will be a gap around like 30% between countries like Singapore, like South Korea, and some other countries, some other developing countries by 2050. And another dimension of this, so access based on location, we want to provide that to everybody everywhere. Another one is the lifetime access. Like you go to university, you have access to this credential for 4 years or so. And beyond that, when you go to work, there's no access to credentials, right? You don't go back to university to do it. So these micro-credentials provide access to lifetime access to credentials for people. And research shows that 98% of what we learn during our life is learned out of formal education, outside formal education. So it's very important to make credentials available to the skills that we'll learn outside that formal education setting.
Okay.
A third dimension is the skills that are somehow marginalized. Like if they are very new, they're not still in the formal education system. If they are from indigenous groups in the society, they're usually not in the mainstream education. If there are things that from communities that are somehow like disadvantaged or marginalized, that again, those skills are not in the formal education system. So these groups don't have access to credentials for the skills they have, but there's no certificate out there for them, right? And so what we're trying to do, we are trying to provide access in a very broad sense of access and across these dimensions to the people around the world.
Okay. Okay.
I think
I got you. For now, only for now. Sure. So I'm going to add your ingredient as access to macro credentials.
Micro, yeah.
Micro credentials, yeah, got you. And I think that, so what I'd just add is that I was looking at the critical skills list that our government here in South Africa recently published, a very, very big list. But a lot of them were focused on the STEM fields, and not only individuals to work in it, but also teachers around STEM. There's not a lot of teachers in our country in this space. And I suppose in this skills revolution, just speaking to the importance of being able to, as we particularly in the early stages, but being able to import, the skills that are presently in the deficit in a particular country while we traverse on the road. Just a thought out there. But Elfi, I saw you and Caroline actually nodding quite strongly as Reza was talking about some micro credentials. So perhaps, Elfi, if we hear from you on Festo and the kind of work and the digital training that you guys are doing out there to try be a lot more impactful in the space and to try and improve the resilience of workers, both young and old in the revolution.
Yes, thank you, Fifi. Maybe first who we are, because you had difficulties to pronounce didactics. So Festo is bringing together technology and innovation and education. We are a private sector industry company. We are serving about 300,000 industry customers around the world and about 60,000 educational customers. So what we do at the industry, we are an innovator in automation technology, and we empower processes in the industry at one hand. And on the education arm of the company, we are striving to empower youth and learners and workers to give them the right skills set that they need for the labor market of today, for the changing environment in the labor market. So we have a strong focus on TVET education, but also, as you just mentioned, in STEM education, for example, and we pay a lot of tribute to teacher training, to train the trainer topics. To your second point, how do we deliver, or what do we see change? How do we see change in terms of resilience over the past 3 years? What we observe, obviously due to Corona and many other reasons, which are quite obvious, we see a big demand growing for soft skills. And I think that was mentioned already today quite a bit, like the famous 4 Cs, the communication skills, the cooperation skills, creativity, critical thinking. But also we see a growing demand due to the speed in technology and innovation for hard skills. So the synopsis is, or the challenge is to bringing this both together, the soft skills and the hard skills. And I think we can accommodate with our learning solutions a great contribution to that, because we try to put the innovations from the industry right into the solutions of our concepts in Festo Didactic. And to your point, how we do particularly deliver digital skills, obviously we had a great demand for this over the past 3 years due to COVID, etc. So in this aspect, we had to really also accelerate our innovations, accelerate our contribution to the education market. And what we did, we developed a platform, a so-called learning experience platform, which is a great fun to use, the Festo Learning Experience. And within that platform, we provide about 200 courses in different technologies. And this is dedicated to any learner, but also is a great asset to teachers. And why did we invest so much in this development? Because due to COVID, we would like to reach and to a greater audience and create a greater impact. Because as we heard previously, not everybody has necessarily easy access to platforms or whatever, or to also hands-on training. So in other words, I would say our contribution to the recipe here is first bringing skills demand and skills supply together, because we know industry and education, and we are very quick on bringing this together and into action. And the other thing is that with our platform, we would like to really get into a bigger outreach and offer many users the opportunity to learn in short nuggets, in small bits and bytes, and get really the skill set for the labor market.
All right. And Elfi, just from your contribution, I'd also like to take away and add to that recipe the importance of combining the hard and soft skills, because often it's spoken about it's either one or the other. But just based on the work that you're doing, the importance of having both in the mix. So we'll put that in the recipe as well. So ladies and gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of the session, and I know that there's a whole lot more that can be discussed, but just not enough time. So we've got around 15 minutes or so left for this discussion. So that's around, there's 7 of us, so that's around 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes each. Okay, I'm also going to start talking less at this stage. What I want us to do to take the session home and also to help wrap up the day is just your key contributions or your key takeaways that you want to leave us with as your attendees here today. Your key contributions in terms of this topic of of skills resilience and more specifically how to reskill the workforce to become more resilient. Manuela, yeah, okay, just was looking if we had a question. So Manuela, your parting shot.
Yeah, very briefly, I want also to follow up on one question that was posed by one of our participants on actually, supporting the costs linked to learning and who takes responsibility for it. So one of the takeaway that we heard today that is definitely, as we said, it's a responsibility that is, of course, of the system. So it's important to create conditions for citizens, young people, senior people, workers, people looking for a job, people who are unemployed and want to gain back skills to access the labor market, that they have the means to do it. And these means are also, we heard today that they're also linked to infrastructure, so access to it, and also languages and ability to know where to look for those skills. I just want to say that those conditions are also at risk and we don't have to give them for granted. That we have a rising poverty due to the impact of COVID, but also to the other conflicts and conditions that we face across the world. And this new poverty rising and also energy poverty puts families and individuals at risk, not only for their living, but also for their investment and access to skills and learning. So we have to be really attentive and not give this for granted.
So thanks so much for that contribution, Manuela. So anyone want to make their last thoughts or their parting shots? A question that has come through, a lovely question from Abdelaziz. I hope I said your name correctly, sir. And he's asking a question around the SDGs and how they can be achieved in the TVET. I think he said. I think that's what he meant. Any takers? Put your physical, your virtual hands up. Oh, okay, I'll let you. Oh, all right. Sure, Manuela, back to you.
Yeah, TVET has a huge role to play. I think Livia brought us today evidence that TVET is part of the solution. And so I think also we heard today throughout other sessions that definitely there is still work to do to make sure we still remove some stigmas that are associated to TVET. So we need more investment into TVET, more TVET also in higher education, more micro-credentials and more technical and vocational education for workers as well as for young people. So yes, TVET is part of ensuring that we can reach the SDGs across all of them, because you can talk about marine life or energy transition, and still the question boils down to, do we have the skills to get there? And so TVET is definitely part of the solution.
Yeah, I like how your face and your energy just rose up and lit up when you're talking about TVET. So we know that the European Training Foundation is leading that charge. So we can be rest assured. All right. So I'm gonna ask Martin and Elfi to make this their last word. It is a question that has come from Johannes, and it's a comment on Volvo and Acida, rather, that did bring, it says, I've seen the driving simulator Volvo and Acida brought to Ethiopia, and Festo's products are also prominent in our education system. So should we expect more virtual environments from both of these companies? And if so, which sectors? Martin, I'll give it to you, and then I'll finish off with Elfi. Are you muted, sir?
So sorry. Now, can you hear me?
I can.
Good. Yes, correct. We have invested and developed in driver simulators for quite some time. I think the trend is now more that we develop the vehicles to support the drivers. It's one thing to train a driver and then get the driver to take responsibility and remember and absorb the knowledge and apply that on an individual basis over time. Is not as efficient as building it into the products. Now, coming back to what Manuela said before, there is not one ingredient or one fixed recipe. We will of course continue with driver simulators as well. It's expensive and it's becoming more and more expensive to develop someone into a truck driver, and of course that reduces the cost and saves the environment and so on. So yes, that has its place. It's not on and off. It's not like it will explode or disappear. It's there to stay, but the development is rather in the vehicles to ensure, let's say, road safety and how to say, a sustainable footprint of the transport.
Yes. Elfi, just your take on the question that's come through.
Yes, thank you for the question. And we play a key focus on TVET, obviously, which is practical experience, but also courses, online courses, etc. And here the question, I think, looking back at what we have done in Ethiopia, is do we have more online, more virtual courses? And actually, this is this learning platform, which is called the Festo Learning Experience. And have a try and go there, because you can experience the first courses for free and quite a big range, and gives you an overview on all the virtual technical courses we provide for those two different industries sectors. So yes, there we have a great portfolio, and I encourage everybody here in the call to watch out for the Festo Learning Experience, besides, of course, of our other solutions. And then my takeaway for the day would be that, again, I think we confirmed all that education and skills is the foundation to cope with the change, to cope with the environmental change, with climate change, and also to develop our society resilience. And I think we can agree that taking ownership at all levels and developing partnerships is fundamental, as nobody can walk alone, and that we have to join efforts together. And it's great for me to see that so many different stakeholders from so many different aspects are coming here together. And hopefully we continue this on a bilateral basis and pursue projects, etc. And ending with giving my big thanks to LKDF to create this tremendous platform for exchange and bringing those various stakeholders from industry, from education, from NGOs all together to build a stronger and better future, so to speak.
Thank you, Elfi. I certainly agree with you in sharing those sentiments of appreciation for this platform, for all of us to learn on our collective responsibilities to, be better and work better together in dealing with a pressing challenge right now that is facing the labor market, and that being the reskilling emergency. So Caroline, your key takeaways, your parting shot, but also feel free to make reference to what was said prior around micro-credentials. I know that you also work quite closely in the space, and if you've got any additions on this, feel free to share that with us at this point.
Thanks. Well, no, I fully agree with what Reza was saying. And I think from the point of view of young people who have a blank slate of skills where they're just starting out, I think micro-credentials are wonderful as a way for them to start building their portfolio early. So we've seen that demand around our entrepreneurial skills pass, that is one of the things they want, because they don't have much on their CV. They want to go into university or college or towards employment with something under their arm. So I think this is a very nimble opportunity for the younger generation, not just the people who are already in work. But I think another positive takeaway is that the generation that's in school, or the Gen Z today, they are embracing digital, they're embracing automation, they're embracing new work norms, they're embracing all these wonderful new things. And if we continue to build their resilience with all of these great things that we've talked about today, then we're just going to add more, we're going to amplify all of the things that they already have at their core in their culture, the way they've been raised. And I think that that intergenerational mixing that we will see when we get them together with the older generation in an enterprise, in an organization, in institutions, that's going to be the secret. Maybe I'll just go too far, the secret sauce, but that mixing there will really be a driver for ultimate levels of resilience going forward. So I think we just need to bring the two sides together, and it will, I think the blessing is actually in the younger generation today.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Caroline, for that contribution. You can tell that you are the better cook here. I mean, I'm talking about a pie, and how can you not have a pie without sauce? And you just introduced the elements of the secret sauce. So thanks so much to that. Otherwise, it would be a really dry pie that we're making right now. Just as we finish off, Livia, your parting shot.
Well, I'd say the main takeaway, I guess that I hope I've contributed to with our evidence is the importance of investing in human capital, in skills particularly, but then also, as we said, this idea, well, in our cases, evidence from low-income countries to both tackle youth unemployment and also build resilience, but also this idea that human capital or skills alone are not sufficient, and then making sure the workers have this credible means to show their skills, to prove them through certification, micro certifications. I think it's essential to really reap all the benefits of this investment, being them short-term, longer-term, more or less intensive. So yeah, I guess the combination of both the human capital and skills and the certification.
Mm-hmm. And I think that you've shown the added benefit that certification does provide, the fact that you actually get paid more, which is what a lot of us need right now. I'm making a joke of it, but it is real.
It's right. It's partly like you're paid more, and partly you're more mobile, in the sense that we show that in the research, what we find is that once you have a certification, if you find a job, if you lose your job, if you become unemployed, you're more likely to jump back to a different job, or jump back into employment, and consequently lower the risk of falling into long-term unemployment.
Sure. Another important point I think you're just emphasizing there, just given this world of the unknowns, when a shock does happen with that credential, you might get hit harder, but you can bounce back. Thanks so much.
Exactly.
Reza and Mona, sorry about that. Mona, just Reza, I'll take your final word first, sir, and then afterwards we'll leave it to Mona to take us home.
Sure. I'm just going to quickly say, in the history of humankind, that learning has never been so easy, fast, and low cost. We have the advantage of using these technologies, augmented reality, as Martin said, online learning, as other people mentioned here. And I think we need to take advantage of that. The cost of learning is going to go lower and lower, and we're going to have to embrace technology to build up this resilience that we're talking about.
Got you.
And then I would just add that it's really important that we stay focused on the link of, we worry about upskilling and training because that increases your likelihood of getting a job, and that job gets you income and financial well-being and resilience. And so with as much energy that we put into talking about training and upskilling, we should also be putting equal amounts of energy in how do we mobilize jobs? How do we make sure that companies are also changing their hiring practices so that it is easier for someone who doesn't have a degree of a certain title and type to get access to that job if they can prove they have the skills? How do we make sure people who engage in gig work can earn a stable amount of income that's the equivalent of a full-time job? So all of this fundamentally is about increasing personal and financial well-being. And so we should always keep our eyes very clear on that prize, because it requires multiple points of intervention to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. And I think that for all stakeholders, right? Because I mean, if as individuals we are in a more sound financial setting, it means less requirement for the governments to provide a social security net. Governments whom we know are under a bit of pressure right now, particularly in text. So Mona, I would agree with that contribution. Thanks so much. And I'd like to thank the entire panel. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for helping us end the day on quite a really strong and informative and an exciting note with your fabulous backgrounds, of course. I think that Wale is there standing by, ready to come back to share his thoughts on what was said as we prepare to wrap up.
Could you try again?
Well, I don't think that message was for me. Anyway,
it was the computer being too smart.
Yes, you know, technology has moved so far ahead of us. You could call it some form of AI, right? Anyway, I thought that was great. I enjoyed that so much. And for me, the biggest takeaway was the point about the cost of learning is going to get lower and lower with technology. I think that is something for everyone to think about. I think the borders, the limits of learning have really been broken with technology. And I think more and more, if more and more individuals, governments, businesses, policymakers can grab that reality, I think so much can change. So I'm certainly going to think about that moving forward.
You know that he's a financial journalist when he talks about costs and costs. He highlights.
Nice point.
I think we can release the panel, right? Thanks so much.
Yes, no doubt. Thank you.